In this episode of the Caustic Rebel podcast.
But anyhow, I saw a picture of this today, and I'm looking at that, and I'm like, that was awesome. Like, it was basic research, but yeah. But then you might say, well, how awesome was it? Because it didn't make it even down the hallway. Go, report.
Got it. Hello, and welcome to the Caustic Rebel podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Tom Quinn, coming at you from Thun, Switzerland.
And good evening. I'm Peter O'Shea, coming at you from Vancouver, Canada. The overall theme is, when is science mature enough to turn into a product? And what role does academia have in fostering that? And then what role do the leaders in academia have to clearly communicate the whole story?
I can give you some feedback on that. My own particular situation is, it's an illustrative example. The thing I alluded to before was that there's no uptake in society, in like outside of academia, for the technology that I was developing. It was an exciting idea within an academic context, but it's like I took off in an airplane and I was flying this thing, and I had this new technology, and I was making it better all the time. Not just me, but my students and people I was associated with, and there was nowhere to land. Right? There's nowhere to put this beast down, right? And so you either you just let it crash, or you keep going with it, and in the hopes, I guess, that somehow it'll find a landing place somewhere. And that's bad. I mean, that's not how you want to be running a company. A company, if you start up a company, there's a couple of different strategies you can follow. When I say strategies, what I mean is exit strategies. People tend to think of starting a company as something that hopefully goes forever, but an equally valid strategy is to start your company, and probably a better strategy in academics is to start your company, do the product development that's necessary to get something off the ground. But as soon as it comes to marketing and strategy and stuff like that, I mean, it doesn't belong in academia anymore. If you've ever been involved in starting a company, you realize that product development is about 10% of what you need to do, or less. I mean, mainly what you need to do is spend your time talking to investors, positioning your product in the marketplace, hiring people, figuring out strategic things. It's got nothing to do with what you're hired to do as an academic. Very quickly, if you want to run a company and be an academic at the same time, it's a full-time job just to run the company, like way more than a full-time job. And there's nothing left for being an academic. Whereas if you're developing a product in academia, for example, if you're developing a new drug or a new drug delivery platform, that's perfect, because you can do the product development to show that the thing works and optimize its function and figure out all the technical details. And there are tons of companies just waiting to snap up that technology and bring it into their portfolio and turn it into something, right? And you can get out at that point. You can do the product development, which is absolutely appropriate for an academic context. But when it comes to actually running the company and getting into all of the really way more than 90% of the work that's involved in getting a product to work, then as an academic you can get out. And I didn't have that for that's my particular case. But like I described, there was nowhere for my airplane to land. And so I was kind of stuck.
Now you're put in this position where you're like, okay, I'm no fool. I have a good idea. It sort of works, and I have some prototypes, and I got some people working with me. But dude, if society thinks that they're going to be running around on fake, on lab generated knees or getting ear replacements like overnight, and then you're kind of in an awkward position because you're not ready yet, and you don't want to just hold the tents because there's something there.
Yeah.
But if you to get to the next stage, you go in there and say, well, now, and you start telling them about the problems, and it's like, they disassociate from their gene expression goes.
Look,
If you don't,
yeah,
and everyone's, they're lost. Venture capital is
exactly.
like, I came in
Exactly.
here with a
Yeah.
wad of cash, and I want to be walking out of here 4 years from now with 10 watts of cash. And what are you blathering on about? Is this ready or not? They just want, it seems like certain industries that
this is the problem.
this is the
Yeah.
fake it till you make it, right? You're like,
Yeah.
no, we sort of have something, but like, I don't know, fake. Well,
This is exactly the problem. You're hitting the nail on the head when it comes to the conundrum that we face with academics and entrepreneurship. I want to use the word nexus, but that's ridiculous. Anyways, if I take a step back, if you imagine, like, there's this notion of the venerable old professor who sits in the ivory tower, and he's got a desk, an office full of books, and he's read every single book, and he just pulls them off the shelf and points to this and that, but he's not relevant. Like you have somebody who's an absolute master of their domain, and they can teach anything, and they conduct academic research with a handful of PhD students, but there's no expectation that they do anything relevant.
Is that true?
I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there as a kind of conception.
I mean, I don't know what you mean by relevant. Like, because
connected. Like, I'm thinking specifically of engineering professors, and I'm thinking connected to industry. Like relevance being a connection.
Because I was thinking of physics, and just today I was doing a little background on the history of superconductors, and apparently it was the first superconductor was detected by, Ones. He didn't even know or it didn't make it out of his lab. This is 1911, and the labs in this vein of research had figured out ways of, refrigerating systems way down to near absolute zero. And they're just like, that's so cool. And I think they got bored of just smashing stuff that was really cold. So they started doing more subtle things with cold, and they were just testing the properties of all kinds of stuff. And Mr. Ones was like, hey, I'm going to measure the resistivity. Like, generally the resistivity of metals goes down as you make them colder. Anyhow, he was measuring, and at 7 degrees above absolute zero, it went to zero. And he was like, oh,
that can't be right.
That can't be right. But he did it a few times. Anyhow, he wrote it all down in his books, and somehow he didn't run down the hall screaming. And so they had to attribute this discovery to him. But anyhow, I saw a picture of this today, and I'm looking at that, and I'm like, that was awesome. Like, it was basic research, but but then you might say, well, how awesome was it? Because it didn't make it even down the hallway, let alone.
I don't want to be too negative about it. I'm just pointing out that there's a vein of academics that is very in ivory tower. I think the phrase is ivory tower, right? If academics remains in the ivory tower always, then it's good for educating undergrads, right? But governments who fund universities. they can get more bang for their buck if they put a little bit of pressure on the professors, especially engineering professors, to make an effort to get out of the ivory tower and be more relevant. And I sympathize with that. I think that should be the expectation. I think engineering professors should be expected to be relevant. You know, how we help them do that, and exactly what the expectations are, we can debate. But the push to have professors work on technologies that make it out of the ivory tower and actually contribute to the development of local industry, I think that should be expected,
Yes.
right? And so that much said, the thing is, it's not to be underestimated what that entails. If you have a university professor whose research is all funded by some huge cigarette company, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you know that they're bought and paid for, and they're just gonna put out a bunch of confounding results that poke holes in the thesis that smoking causes cancer, right?
I would love to study the history of this. Like that is one of the prototype examples of where, okay, we sort of all we now know, but then again, we have it going on today. I want to know when did that start with that, or were they doing this back in the 1800s? Like, what's the history of commerce putting their thumb on the scale of academia?
I don't know. I mean, that's an excellent question. I suspect that universities, when they started, engineering departments were very closely connected to industry. I mean, it's natural that at an early stage, they would be like directly in bed with industry. I don't know. I suspect that, and that over time the pendulum swung to a more noble ivory tower concept of how academia, engineering academia should function, and then that's too far in the other direction, right? That's too far in a sort of isolating ivory tower direction.
Yeah.
And then, in the course of our career, the expectations have grown a lot for engineering professors and engineering faculties to be more directly connected to industry. And honestly, I can tell you, in my opinion, I think it makes a lot of sense if you can manage it so that the universities, the academics, are involved in product development, but not in running companies. As soon as they're responsible for actually running a commercial enterprise, it corrupts everything. It's just as bad as some company which has very specific interests, in influencing public perception, is sponsoring a professor's research. You can't trust that professor anymore. And if the professor is involved in aspects of development of some company or management of some company that they're directly involved in, you can't trust them. You can't trust them to give you straight answers anymore, because there's huge, very often there's huge sums of money at stake, and they're in the pocket of they're in the pocket of somebody. So that's a very broad generalization, but that's how I would summarize it. We want engineering professors to be involved in product development, but we don't want them involved in aspects of marketing or business development that go beyond product development. In my opinion, there's just too much potential for dishonesty. This is interesting what we're talking about, and it reminds me just quickly of a phenomenon that we've both observed growing up in Canada. It's that Canadian hockey players are the best in the world. I mean, by far. Okay, sure. And the NHL is loaded with Canadian hockey players. None of them have an interest in seeing Canada I mean, they're torn. What I was going to say is they don't have an interest in seeing Canada win the gold medal at the Olympics, right? And the reason is they're
Okay.
professionals. They're professionals, and
Yes.
they get a piece of a pie, and the size of that pie is dictated by the interest in hockey of American viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, so what interest does a Canadian hockey player have in seeing Canada win the gold medal at the Olympics? They have a financial interest in seeing the United States win. I mean, just put it bluntly.
That is when the puck is there, like bouncing around near the goal crease. I think that's asking a lot for your guy from North Battleford to he's going to put it in the back of the net, buddy.
No, of course they win 50% of the time despite this. The fact is they have a very significant financial incentive to see another team win.
Yeah. Well,
you know, I'm not saying they're going to cheat or anything.
Yeah.
But
they're not going to kick and scream if they can't go to the Olympics or whatever, or at least their agent won't.
It's sort of like you have to understand people's motivations in those terms. If somebody is involved in running a company and is in academics and is pointedly asked a question which says, you know, in a roundabout way says, is your company worth anything? Is it worth it for a government or private investors?
Now I feel like I have to interject. One of my good friends here is an academic in the field of fusion.
I see him. Yeah, I see him.
Okay. And he was introduced by my other good friend. You guys went to high school together, didn't you? You and Jordan Peterson?
Something like that. Yeah, he was.
You worked together at the mall at Cinnabon? Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, said expert is an academic. He has nothing specifically to do with running a company. I think that I believe that to be true. That when to be specific, the Commonwealth Fusion Systems spun out of MIT. At some point, they're like, whoa, we're going to actually, you know, this is kind of going to work. At some point, it was like, okay, the ship is leaving the dock. Do you want to stand on the dock or you want to get on the ship? You cannot have one leg on both anymore.
That's awesome. That's how it should work.
And it's like, it should work like that. But then you're sort of, it's like, well, I know everybody on board and somebody's coming to me and saying, what do you think about that ship? And what are the chances out there in the iceberg field? I don't know. You're going to stop getting invited to Christmas parties unless you, you know, maybe.
That's a very real problem, but I don't know how you're going to avoid that because you're talking about people who are expert in a very limited area, and there's just not that many of them. Huh?
Yeah. Well, here's how this particular field, the fusion has the big revolution has been the move to private. They want to say industry. It's not an industry because there's no product in my mind, but the private support is propping up fusion right now. The hallmark of privatization that is trumpeted as being the savior here is private companies are nimble and government institutions are, you know, stodgy and slow and conservative and they don't know how to move fast, but private industry is nimble. And that's why they're going to nimbly jump the lily pads the way to fusion, I guess. But I was like, question, I thought the hallmark of the free market was competition. And without a product, you can't say, look, mine weighs more, mine costs less, mine tastes better. If your product is a science that's hoping to become a productizable technology, that's what you compete on. And I think that where I want fusion, as an example, to move is where the leaders, like many of these fusion companies are led by scientists. But right now, there's this strange silence when it comes to mentioning the technical hurdles that company A will have to be. I think the representatives of fusion companies A, B, C, and D should say, fusion company A, we have achieved this. These are the challenges we know we are facing on both the science and the technology. Here's how we feel we stand today. Here's why we think we are going to overcome them. And here is the time scale that we're suggesting. Company B says, whoa, with all due respect, I think you forgot challenge number 7. Company A. What about challenge number 7? And they say, we at company B have an excellent solution to challenge number 7. Granted, the other challenges that you mentioned, we also face. Our technology, should we ever get the science to work, is really good. And they say, well, now that you mention it, I think that you can't call yourself a fusion industry until you're actually collegially within the rules of the scientific method.
Competing, right? Is
competing.
What you're
And so, since Dennis was asked to jump onto the boat or stay on the dock, he stayed on the dock. I think he now has an obligation to talk about all the companies and say A, B, C, D. If you're at company A, you're going to put a polish, on your story, maybe de-emphasize a little, emphasize. But guess what? If you overdo it, that will get called out by your competitors at company B, and they'll say, "Whoa, I think you owe us a better explanation on that, and you've completely ignored this challenge."
I mean, to what extent, PJ, is like you mentioned earlier, it's not an industry because nobody has a product.
Yeah.
Right. If you sort of put it into a meta sphere of interpretation, it's the product at the moment is hope, or is that what it is? There seems to be a class of people who want to invest in fusion, right? There's these billions of dollars that people are waving around to invest in it. Like there's for some reason, although there's no product anywhere and nobody has ever made a piece of toast using
fusion-based electricity,
something other than the plasma fusion reactor in the sky. People are lining up to spend billions on this. It seems. I mean, I get
they're not lining up. I think there's been.
But what are they?
One
what are they
company got.
In?
There are some legitimate plays here. It's not just hope. I think in investing in a private company, the private company has an IP portfolio. They have patents. They have, that they'll. Should this turn into a product?
Okay.
Then it's like, whoa, you have to license that from us because we captured that. So that's a play. Unfortunately, I think real plays in fusion are billions, and there's only 1 billions play that's at CFS. I think another couple are pushing $1 billion.
Tune in next time, dear listener, as your dynamic duo tackle other daunting questions with other guests. Stay tuned for our upcoming 3-part series with Conor McGregor.
Well, a wrecking ball is swinging, ringside bells are ringing.